Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 91st IREPAS meeting in this heart of Europe. As we have done in the past, we have gathered your questions and concerns prior to the conference, and we will discuss these with you and look forward to your participation. And we can start with the questions. The first question was on CBAM, and let me introduce you. I'm sure that you have heard that this morning, but carbon border adjustment mechanism, I guess, for the green energy. Though we have a nice long presentation earlier on the morning session, I believe there are still many questions than answers for the traders. So let me start asking Willie to discuss that.
Yeah, as we were all confronted with the new CBAM, which some people really needed a long time to understand what it is, and there was a lot of psychological and also paranoia feeling about it. But after it was implemented in 23 and going over now to 24 with a real reporting system, the people more and more got now at least used to the techniques. So to register in Brussels, to report your CO2 numbers, which you have to gather from your factories and producers all around the world from non-EU countries. And so it was getting a bit calmer. People understood the system, and so far we haven't seen any impact on any prices or whatsoever. But this will definitely change from 26, as we learned in this report this morning, and it will have a huge impact. We saw on one example that for cold-rolled coil or hot-rolled coil, depends where it's coming from, it can be even up to $250 a metric ton, additional costs for the market and for the users and for the downstream industry. So it has a huge impact. What we see also right now, more and more, is that the construction companies are confronting our cut and benders, which are ultimately customers, more and more, and reporting what is your carbon footprint, what are you doing on your CBAM, do you have the EPDs ready, and. So it's an enormous amount of reporting, it's an enormous amount of bureaucracy. I can tell you, only in my company, we had to hire 2 people doing nothing else but reporting CBAM, reporting EPDs, getting all the numbers together. And this is another cost factor which has to be, again, transferred to the market and to the downstream industry.
So are you saying that the CBAM is something that you report yourself? Because I noticed that all the mills will have to get their CBAM valuation by an accredited company. But who's that company? You know, if you're doing it on your own, it's one thing. If they do it for you, is another thing. And what is the criteria? Really, it's not clearly established. I listened to the gentleman this morning. I wasn't really clear on it.
No, what the mills have to do is they have to get an evidence about their score 1, 2, 3, which is producing raw material, production costs. What is the carbon footprint they are having for producing a ton of steel? So if you are having, for example, an electric arc furnace and your energy is coming from hydrogen, is coming from windmill, from solar panels and so on, your footprint will be very low. Yeah. If you are having a blast furnace and coking coal and your energy is coming from gas or coking coal, yeah, you are not really good in your carbon footprint, which can go up to 2.3, 2.4 metric tons of carbon per ton of steel. And the lowest we heard so far is 200 tons, 300 kilos, 400 kilos for a ton of rebar.
So Are you suggesting for 1 ton of steel, you get 2 tons of carbon?
From a blast furnace, yeah, up to 2 tons of carbon. Definitely. And the mills just have to report, to get an evidence by a company like SGS, or there are thousands others, yeah, and then they have this certificate, which they have to give to the importer in Europe, and then it's the importer in Europe who has to declare the CBAM to Brussels, saying the steel is coming from factory X, having a carbon footprint of this number, reported by a accredited company and inspection company, and then in the future, the importer will be responsible to also pay the penalty to Europe, to Brussels.
And for the reference number, the gentleman in the morning was saying that the reference will be the top 10% of the European producers will be considered to be the reference zero, and everybody else would be considered to pay. And then that, I don't think it's going to happen. I'd like to see that happen, is the blast furnaces in Europe will pay as well.
Yeah, what he said was that the best 10 in Europe will be the benchmark and will be the zero level. All the 90% below will have to pay, either buy certificates or have to reduce further. But the same applies also for importers. So they also, that will be the benchmark. And if you are below that, this amount of CO2, which you are using more, has to be replaced by purchase of carbon.
So I guess that will make the blast furnaces advantage go away, because then they're going to have to pay additional taxes.
Completely, yeah.
You have any comments, Hussein, on this one? Especially coming from China, it must be a lot tougher.
Actually, for the CBM, we don't see conversion from Chinese side from the blast furnace to electric arc furnace. And this is not one of the topic, because as we all know, 85% of the production in China is a blast furnace. And we're talking about only 10 to 15% is the electric arc furnaces. So making the investment from converting the production from blast furnace into electric arc furnace is not going to be small investment.
Well, I mean, I looked at the numbers this morning. It was saying that maximum is going to be 240 euros per ton, and that's nothing for China.
Surely.
Surely. Why spend the money to convert? You can spend the $250 additional subsidy and you move on. By the way, can I have your comments? Is anybody here has something to say on this one? Because this is a new subject and we're just learning it. So there's a lot of really questions and answers. Is there anybody who wants to add their 2 cents to it? Okay. It doesn't make, like you said this morning, yes. It's another trade barrier. It's another, basically, dumping, or not dumping, really. It's a trade barrier.
Obstruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what we can feel already, and this is really coming a lot now, is that even the financial investors are requesting those green projects. So they don't order anymore a shopping mall or a high-rise building or something like that to invest. No, they say we want to have a high-rise building, but it has to be green. Because if it's green, they get more and cheaper interest rates for that project, because it's funded by people who have this green idea as well in their pockets. And so you see more and more the request from these financial investors to have it greener, greener, greener. And so it will come from that side as well. It's not necessarily coming from a private investor who wants that. Yeah, if he just wants to build a house, you really don't care that much if it is now a bit greener than the other one. But for financial investors, to have all these EPDs together and to show your construction company, look here, this is a real green project, it gives the construction company a much better financial support from banks and investment.
Well, if I take my trader's hat aside and think about as a consumer in America, yeah, I would like the steel that comes to America come from greener steel than all these blast furnaces, and some of the blast furnaces are dirtier than the others, so really not all of them should be put in the same category. I've seen towns that you fly in, you can't breathe, so if the steel comes from much better mills that really pay attention to environment, that's good. Of course, the key thing is how do you measure and how do you measure the difference? There's a lot of vagueness there. That's why I thought that the institution that they're going to hire to really do the certification, who's going to do the certification in India versus who's going to do the certification in Germany are probably two different people. Anyway, let's go to the next question. How do you see the iron ore market trend? From my point of view, it's a down cycle. I mean, beginning of the year, you were like at $140. Now it is like $96, like 40% from the beginning of the year. It is, will it continue? I don't know, but I think typically fourth quarter, it just tilts up a little bit, but looks like it's on the downward trend, and it has a lot to do with China not buying. Is that correct?
Sure, I agree. Actually, right now, in stock level in China is 150 million ton. So, which is compared to last year's 32% iron ore inventories increased. So that inventory, okay, there is a general expectation that the production cut is going to be affected till end of the year. So which is going to give us some extra also pressure on the iron ore price as well. But we should also not forget that since last 4 weeks, iron ore prices touching in the level of 90s and also rebounding again. So it's not breaking the 90s level. But when we look at the recent picture, yes, it should break 90s level.
Oh, you're expecting it to go down?
Yes.
Further down? Whoa. Even on the fourth quarter or the first quarter?
Is it coming, because the stock level is clearly showing that, which is going to be more than the production line.
Yeah. Well, that obviously gives a major advantage to the blast furnace mills that produce the steel from much cheaper iron ore, comparing to the scrap haven't come down at all. So it's a huge difference, a huge gap between the two. Any other comments?
No.
Okay. Current spread between scrap price and rebar price. Maybe you can tell the European side.
Yeah, from the European side, talking to producers, you know that there was a last tube and wire fair in Düsseldorf, which was also greatly attended. And if you speak to the factories in Europe, they more and more calculate that the spread should be 300 euros a ton between scrap to the rebar. Because of various factors, transport costs, which increased a lot with the toll fees and so on. The blue-collar workers got a salary increase over the last years of 10% and up to 11, 12%. And energy costs, raw material costs, so scrap is also not cheap. So if they calculate the waste of scrap, the loss of scrap, and all the costs on top, they said, we need 300 euros to make a decent living.
That's very nice to hear, but unfortunately, the situation is quite different from what I understand in Turkey. In Turkey, the scrap is still like 370 level, and the rebar FOB is like 570 level, so there's like $200 margin that they have, which is tight, which is really the reason why the Turkish mills are suffering. And I think around the world, it's this number, the $200 gap has been going on for months. In fact, I remember last IREPAS meeting, we looked at it, it was 200, around 200, and the one before it was 200. So what do you think? I guess in China it doesn't matter?
Yes, actually, since we're all talking about the inflation globally, we don't see the inflation also in the cost of the production. As you mentioned, for years, the cost calculation from scrap to rebar is $200 per metric ton. So actually, we have to also see some inflation, which should be more than 200 plus 230. But unfortunately, existing market condition is not allowing the producers to overcome this tight cost of production.
Which is the same case in Europe, and especially or let's say in Germany, where when I say 300 euro is a benchmark, which they really would like to have in order to make a decent profit. Currently, and for the last month, they are selling with a gap of 240 to 250 euros a ton. So even that number is higher compared to the $200. Yeah, but this is.
Should we blame the scrap people? Are they really taking all the cake, icing on the cake?
This is the question. Do you think the scrap will follow the iron ore or not?
I wouldn't think so, because talking about CBAM and talking about getting greener, your only option is to use electric arc furnace and to use as much scrap as you can. So in my opinion, and this is a threat we also have to expect from China, if they just move 5% more into electric arc furnace, that is more than 50 million tons of additional scrap demand. Where should it come from? You cannot plant scrap. Scrap is there where you have an industry, but in these emerging markets like India, like even China still in some areas, so there is not sufficient scrap. Africa, there is not sufficient scrap to run the circle and the cycle of using scrap again for new material. And also scrap has an end. I think you can use scrap 5 times and then it's disappeared because of, not physically disappeared, but you cannot make out of 1 metric ton of scrap, you cannot make 1 metric ton of steel. Right?
Okay.
So you have a ratio of 1 to 1 or 1.1, 1.2. So in between 5 to 6, 7 cycles,
but
you need new scrap to produce new scrap.
But what changes is like China used to be really, I shouldn't say net importer, but they were not using as much scrap. But they're producing scrap now. China, because it's industrialized now, is producing scrap faster than any other nation.
But by far not in that amount. They
that
just
use.
Building up now a car industry. Of course, now they need much more scrap for their own demand for building these cars and exporting it to Germany, or all over the world now.
Yeah, all over the world.
And then they will be scrap there.
Mm-hmm. About 3 years ago, there was an import tax in China, 2%. And afterwards, it's removed, and China started to import scrap. Then 2 years ago, total scrap that China imported was only 600,000 tons. So China is not a net importer of the scrap.
Yeah.
And usually the cargoes which is coming from Japan, South Korea, so this is what we call is the short sea 3,000, 5,000 ton vessels. So they've been not receiving 40, 50,000 ton.
They produce their own scrap.
But you will agree that if they move more into the electric arc furnace, that this picture will change quite rapidly.
Actually, government strategy in the 5-year strategy in the steel business to increase the usage of the scrap 30%, which is at the moment 14 to 15% is the scrap usage out of the total production. So if you're talking about 15% is increase, we're talking about 150 million ton of extra scrap.
That's what I said.
Which is going to change totally the game.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think our scrap prices are high, and it's not really sustainable. So I think, either our pricing on steel is going to go higher, or the scrap has to come down. Otherwise, the mills are not going to make money at all. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I feel sorry for the mills. We are traders. We negotiate with them every day. But if they don't really make money, then we can't make money eventually. Okay, I'll go to the next question. what consequences there might be on European raw material markets after the depletion of the Russian BPI quota? Okay, maybe you can talk.
Well, we have pre-discussed this question in the preparation meeting, and it was said that it really doesn't have a big impact because even if the quarterly quota is gone, okay, the material will eventually lay in the port for a while and waiting for the next quota to be customs cleared and used. And well, there is not really a lack of basic pig iron, so there is sufficient other sources like Ukraine, India, Africa, and so on. So in the preparation meeting, the people were not really convinced that this will have any impact and will not really change the game. So what we learned later is that this import of pig iron from Russia will nevertheless end by September 27. 26 or 27?
26.
Okay.
Well, by the way, I don't know if you knew what it means. It's really pig iron quota, that the Russia had a quota for it, and it's on a descending scale, and supposedly will end in 26. And really what happens is the price will go up, and there will be enough sources. There's enough sources of pig iron in the world, so it's not like suddenly they're out of pig iron. It's just that they'll be buying from other sources and paying a little bit more than before.
We experienced the same problem, let's say it was literally every product in Europe, whether it's rebars, flat rolled, cold rolled, wire rod. So if the quota is gone, either from a specific country having a quota or from all others. So yeah, that's a big risk.
The price may go up.
The price, the price may not go up because the timetable is too short. So you are buying something now for, let's say, delivery October. Yeah? So it comes in October, you cannot customs clear it because the quota is gone. So you have to customs clear it in January. Okay, in this period of time, there is not so much material sitting there, but I agree, some people have to buy domestic in the interim, yeah, to help that out. So that is correct, but it does not have really a big effect on the prices.
On the same parallel, I know that you guys, Europe is importing natural gas, was importing from Russia. Are you importing at all, or is it zero?
To be frank, I think we are still importing from Russia.
Any comments? I'd like to know if Europe is still...
Europe, definitely, because Orban in Hungary is able to get as much as he wants. And
okay, except for Orban.
Yeah.
And because I thought that was limited, and that helped U.S. sell a lot more in a better pricing, but our prices went down, so there must be something else coming in, because for a while our natural gas prices went up to $6, and now I see it's back to $2, so there must be other sources coming in, or Russia is still delivering. Any comments? You know what's going on? Okay, I'll pass. Well, this is the same question we hear all the time. Billets versus scrap for the electric arc furnace, and electric arc furnace versus the blast furnace in terms of production cost. Who do you like for the next 6 months? Who do you think is more, I guess, competitive in the next 6 months?
Blast furnace.
Yeah, with those prices?
With those prices, no doubt about it.
Yeah, with $96, price, yeah, it definitely gives them a huge advantage. And the CBAM doesn't really kick in.
Not yet.
Next 6 months.
Not 6 months out.
So it's definitely advantage. Any other comments? Anyone who disagrees with it? Okay. How do you compare and interpret the 2023 and 2024 crude steel production in China? Any expectations of production cuts?
In 2023, the production, daily production in China was 2.4 million ton. And in 2024, we have seen that the production, daily production is 2.2. So in 2023, the capacity usage was 89%, and this year the capacity usage is 84%. So which we clearly see that the production is relatively coming down. So which we also believe that that production cut is going to give some pressure on the also iron ore.
Is it market-driven, or is government putting pressure on the mills?
Like last year, there was an announcement from the government side, the production will be cut. So all the producers in China will not produce any quantity more than last year. So maximum quantity that they can produce, same as last year. So this is what we have seen also last year as well.
Because I remember before the COVID, there were some zones in China close to Beijing area, you couldn't breathe. So the government shut down those mills, and especially during the Olympics, I think, they shut down those mills. Exactly. There was forced reduction in production. So right now, they're not touching.
Now, rather than pollution, the reason that the government is planning to cut down the production is because of the loss in the production. Because we all know that about $70 up to $80 per metric ton, there is a loss in the production of the steel. So that's the reason that by reducing the production, so at least the Chinese producers try to recover their loss.
Okay. How do you compare, again on China, and with 2023 and 2024 inventory levels in China, which is very interesting?
First of all, when we talk about the inventory, regarding the iron ore, as we just mentioned, 150 million ton iron ore is lying right now in the port in China. And as we mentioned, compared to last year's 32% is the more than last year figure. Then, when we look at the Australian iron ore stock level in China, is increased by 29%. In Brazil, we've been seeing that 34% iron ore is coming more from Brazil. So since the government and also the producer already started to cut down the production, at least some of the mills start to cut down the production in the blast furnaces. So we believe in that the iron ore also stock level is going to increase further. And regarding rebar right now inventory is compared to the last 5 years is not that much high. So the total inventory for the rebar is 5 million ton.
How about hot rolled coil?
Hot rolled coils is 4.3 million ton, but compared to last year's hot rolled coils inventory is very high. Yeah. And even some of the mills in China, rather than producing billets, they start to convert their production into rebar. And some of the also rebar producers, and even for the hot roll producer, they start to also convert their production into rebar as well.
So everybody's turning to rebar.
Yes.
But the construction industry is not that strong, so there will be a lot of accumulation of rebar.
Also, that's right.
Okay. Next question is, how do you compare Anthrop 2023 and 2024 imports and exports of China?
Let me also give...
Is there any imports?
Yes.
Okay.
200,000 ton. So
in a 1 billion
billets and the slab is quite low.
Okay.
So China, we can say that the China doesn't have any import intention right now, like 2-3 years ago. When we analyze the export of the China, and as you will remember, last year the export of the China was 92 million ton, so which is only referring less than 9% of the total production. Actually, when we look at the China is not a big exporter percentage-wise. The quantity-wise, no doubt. So in here, whenever the local market consumption is coming down, whatever the percentage that the export is increased is not much helping the local consumption. So as we know, the flat side in China, the biggest exporter, which is referring about 60% of Chinese export. Long product is about 15%. In China, the export of flat steel in 2023 was 5 million ton monthly. And this year is about 6 million ton monthly in 2024.
And where does it go? Majority of the exports goes to Southeast Asia?
Southeast Asia, Middle East, and also Turkey, South America. Those are the main markets. And for the long product, China in 2023 only exported 900,000 ton long product. That was 900,000 ton monthly export. And this year, monthly export is 1 million ton. So monthly, the export of the long product in China increased by 100,000 ton, which is referring
10%.
about 10%.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, in the 1980s, when I was young, my biggest export was steel from Turkey to China. Yeah. And the next one was hot roll coil from US to China, believe it or not.
Actually,
that has changed. And we were limited, I never forget, that the coils had to be limited to 5 tons max. And I never understood why. I said, we have 10-ton coils, can we not ship it to you? They said, no, because our trucks can only carry 5-ton max. That's good old days.
Actually, recently, about 3 years ago, we have exported hot roll coils from Turkey to China.
That's interesting.
And we have exported scrap from China to Turkey. So let me also give you some total Chinese exports, steel exports.
Okay.
So last year, total Chinese steel export was, as you will recall, 91 million ton. And the monthly average of the export was 7.6 million ton. And in 2024, it's monthly 8.75 million ton. So, which is also clearly showing that this year, we will going to see over 100 million ton. So another 10% safely increase in China in the export.
Okay, we have, I guess, next question similar to that. Why has China been so aggressive with billet exports recently? Because they have too much of it, but go ahead.
I mean, whatever the product is, whatever the raw material is, whenever China start to export their material, which is clearly showing that the local consumption is getting less, is not encouraging the production in the local market. So that's the reason that China start to export billets. It was last time 2015, 2016. After that, we haven't seen that the China was exporting billets, because as a regulation in China, especially government mills, is not allowed to export billets.
Still
because,
today?
Yes. I mean, there is an instruction from the central government. So especially the mills which belong to the central government, they don't export billets, since it's not a value-added material.
Wow. Interesting. Let's go to the next question, also on China. What could strengthen the Chinese long products market over the next 5 years?
I mean, as a long product, is not only related to China. Whatever the long product is, I strongly believe that long product export, it will be getting less and less. So each country, each manufacturer will be local producer, because of the reason that we all know, because of the investment of the long product comparing to the flat product is more feasible. And the China, it's only 14-15% of the total production is a long product. And China has been losing the market, and we don't see much China in the export market, except Southeast Asia, especially for rebar.
But of course, the biggest usage is local, in their own country. And I think the only way you can bring this back up is, the government subsidizing the housing projects like they did in the past before, or more infrastructure projects, and which I think they're already way ahead of even U.S. on their infrastructure projects. But I guess that's the only way they can stimulate the long products.
Fully agree, because when we talk about the real estates, we're talking about 20 to 25% of the total, the economy, having the percentage in the total economy. So unless real estates sector is picking up, we are not expecting any demand, sufficient demand in local market in China.
Which means it's coming back to you, all that material that they produce. Okay. I guess next few questions are on Turkey. And the first one is, how bad is the current state of Turkish steel industry? From what I understand, it's definitely not healthy, not good, because not only the scrap price has been steady, their price has been dropping. And in Turkey, in July, I think they increased the electricity prices by 20%. Labor costs went up dramatically in Turkey. The minimum wage is up. The average labor cost went up in Turkey. So they're squeezed from both sides, from the scrap side and the cost side. So it's not in good shape. And I think you will see that a lot of mills, that really are highly financed will not survive in this cycle. Any comments?
I agree.
Okay. Actually, Turkish mills used to sell a lot to North Africa and Arabian Gulf, but most of these mills in that region are using DRI-based and blast furnaces, and like in China as well, and in the Southeast Asia. So they lost those markets to the locals and the mills that produce with either the DRI-based or the iron ore direct. So most of Turkish mills are scrap-based. They're electric arc furnace, and that's a big disadvantage when the new markets that they're going after. What is the cost structure of Turkish mills? Are they able to cope with high cost? We just answered this.
Yeah, just answered that.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be easy for them to really cope with that, but we'll see. Turks are resilient and creative, so they're going to find some ways to survive and do better. Which export markets can Turkish mills target? Do you have any idea?
I mean, as far as we see, especially for the flat product, is the European market is one of the buyers, and also we've been seeing the demand for the East Europe. And the Middle East was the major market for Turkey, but unfortunately, because of the ongoing problems for the war crisis, so also Turkey, unfortunately, start to lose or already lost the Middle East market. So one of the markets that the Turkey is also paying attention for Saudi Arabia, because everybody's having some positive expectation about Saudi Arabia, which so it's within also our expectation as well. So because of the projects, so
but I
Turkey
understand those projects, they only want to use their own steel for those projects, from what I understand.
They do, but also they are welcoming the foreign investment as well.
Well, I think the only chance they have is the neighboring countries where the transportation cost is very low, so they will have to keep exporting to Eastern Europe or just east of Turkey to a few countries around them, and maybe whatever the countries have the sanctions against Chinese, they can probably, or anti-dumping, they can go after those countries, but not a whole lot left.
Yeah, it will be more and more difficult for the Turks to find new markets, because whatever is new now is old for others. And if you see the development of Turkish investments in Africa, which is already limiting certain areas as an export market for other Turkish producers, and yeah, more projects which are announced already. And it's a similar way what the Chinese are also doing now by investing more and more overseas, because they foresee that the trade barriers will be higher and higher and higher, and there is more and more localizing business rather than globalization. And so maybe this is now the fashion of the time, to bring your production into those areas where you want to sell this item. Whether this is very wise, I have my doubts, but I'm not a economical expert in that sense. But I think so far we lived pretty well with the turnaround of material, bringing this from here to there, having open borders, having open minds, and yeah, rather working together than working against each other. And this is more and more fashion now. All started by the Trump administration with the safeguard, which then was copied by the Europeans, was copied by all others. And so American was always, with the anti-dumping issues, was always the leader of protectionism, although they were always saying they are the leader of the free trade. And
no, not anymore.
But they were saying that. So.
Yeah, not anymore.
And so yeah, it's more and more difficult to find new sources, because as soon as you have someone in that country where you want to export this material, the lobby meanwhile is so big, and it's so easy now to make those leaders understand that now you have to protect our country as well, because they are doing that, they are doing that, they are doing that. So it's much easier. When we had a free world, it was hard as a country to say, okay, we block ourselves because all the rest is open. Now they say, okay, this is closing, he's closing, he's closing, he's closing, so I cannot close.
Wow.
Regardless to any WTO agreements we had. So
doesn't work.
Well,
I guess the only logical solution is to still go to Europe. And if the economy in Europe really picks up, right now they're almost in recession, especially Germany being in the worst case in Europe. If German economy picks up, if the European economy picks up, I think Turkey will be fine, because they can still ship to to Europe, and that's the logical market for them. That's their backyard. Anyway, all right. Let's see. I guess this is about U.S. Trump or Harris, which will be better for the U.S. and global long steel markets. Why? Well,
both are.
Okay.
Both
yeah, I know. Yeah, I can tell you that they both are really not good for, steel industry. They both have. I mean, Trump started some, Section 232, which is nonsensical barrier, and we were hoping that Biden will come and end it. No, he didn't. He kept the same, and in fact, some of the duties, they're going more vigorously on anti-dumping. They're going more vigorously. So I don't think it's going to change. But now Trump came back and said, if I come back, I will put additional 10% tax on all the steel from all over the world. Now, with that, I'd say maybe if in between them, Harris would probably be better off for the steel industry and long products or any steel industry at all. We'll see. But I mean, it really is not even up to the whole America. 4 states will make that whole decision, because that's how the system works in America. So we'll see how it comes. Today, looks like they're even, almost even. So we'll see. We'll see. And let's hope for Harris for the steel industry. To what extent have the U.S. long steel and raw material markets been impacted by the uncertainty in this election year? I really don't think there's a whole lot to do with the election year. And normally, during the election year, you'll see more investments in infrastructure investments and more investments to really stimulate the economy. But this election cycle, I didn't see it. I guess it's because Biden is not interested maybe in running again, so he has no interest to stimulate even more. And I think really the major thing that makes a difference in the U.S. is the interest rates. So if the interest rates are really traditionally high in the U.S., in fact, for us, 6-7% is very high. So if that comes down, then you will see a big change in the steel consumption, because the construction industry will start getting healthy. Right now, the construction industry is really in trouble, and people can't sell their homes, and people can't buy new homes. And the same thing goes for the office space, and the same thing goes for building a warehouse. Interest rates are too high to sustain that type of business. So really, what's going to change is the interest rates, and can the government control that? Supposedly not, because the government should not be controlling the Fed. The Fed is independent, so they can suggest, they can, prefer to say things, but Fed does it whatever they do independently. So the only thing that can probably be worse is the government can print money. When you print money, then you're basically affecting the inflation, which really does affect the interest rates. Okay, another question on China. How deep is China's impact on billet market and competitors, the traditional exporters of billets?
Since last 2 months, we've been not only seeing China, we've been seeing also Southeast Asia producers, Malaysia, Indonesia, and China. So the general expectation was importing Chinese billet, or the billets from Southeast Asia, is going to give some big pressure on the scrap prices. But the scrap prices, it didn't come down as expected. Because if scrap prices came down as per the billet prices came down, so scrap prices should not be more than $300. And we have seen $60 drop on the billet prices, but only $20, $25 the drop on the scrap prices, and which is also clearly showing that two options. Unfortunately, one of the options is the buyer, as Turkey as a buyer, it's lost the influence on the scrap suppliers. Second thing is the scrap suppliers is getting stronger day by day by having another alternatives from the another international markets.
I think it has also another impact, like Turkish rebar producers. If they import scrap, they have to pay a duty, right? If they don't use it for, if they import billets,
yeah,
which they are not re-exporting. So
except Malaysian origin.
Okay.
Or the free trade agreement.
But in case of China, let's say, if the Turkish are importing billets at a good price, they have to find a market where to dispose this material to.
Exactly.
And that is a difficulty today, because the markets, as we've seen, are not available, like Israel, like a lot of other countries, which are simply not there. And that is probably what made it very difficult for the Turkish importers, despite the very high number. But
will Europe open to Turkish imports if the billets are coming from China? Is there a restriction, like Chinese origin restriction, like we have in the U.S.?
No.
So they can ship to Europe.
Yeah.
Oh, here you go. That's a good advantage.
But obviously, it was still not enough with the prices, because if we say from billet to rebars, you end up $40 plus $50.
Yeah.
So you had 510, or Hussein said the latest prices were 495 CFR. So transformed to a rebar, you end up at 550, and with those prices plus transport of another $50 to Europe, you're not competitive for domestic compared to domestic producers.
So are you suggesting the Turks are getting it to consume in their own country rather than export?
Probably.
Any comments, gentlemen? Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'll move on. Who has benefited from the shipping crisis in Red Sea and who suffered? I don't know anybody who benefited from it. It's a disaster.
Well, who benefited are certainly the Chinese owners, the vessels having a Chinese flag, because the Houthis agreed not to mess up with Chinese vessels, so they can still run through the Suez Channel, while all the other flags are preferring to take the longer way, which is about 10 days extra around the Cape of Good Hope. And so that, of course, gives a quite good freight advantage to the Chinese.
But they didn't go through the South Africa.
The Chinese can go through the Suez Channel, so that saves them 10 days, which makes a lot of advantage.
Well, I know who suffered. All the Gulf states, suffered dramatically from it, and that add additional cost to it. I know my company suffered because we had shipments coming in from Middle East, and most of them had to be delayed for another 2 weeks, and we had to pay additional X amount of dollars for the shipping because we couldn't go through the Red Sea. And now we adjusted our prices, but then with those prices we can't sell. So it's been very bad.
And
for
suffering, of course, is the Egyptian government, who, with much less vessels passing the Suez Channel, which is a real income for Egypt.
That's true. How do you see the current situation regarding freight and shipping costs?
Well, we've seen that the freight costs for bulk carriers and so on went down a lot in the beginning of the year and in the middle of the year compared to the starting the war period. And now they went up again because of the Houthi and the Suez Channel issue, because simply the vessels are longer on its way, so there is more transit time, which means you cannot use this vessel so often. So freights slightly went up, but on the other side, we also see that from the world trade in general, especially for these type of vessels, it is not that much of demand anymore as in the past, and so it's kind of balanced. And I think if we see that today you get from Turkey $45 to Europe, it was 70 some time ago, maybe a year ago we were 70. We had from China more than $120, $130 freight rate. Now you are at $65, something like that. So it is really back to normal, and I think the current situation is okay for our trading, and I don't see much space in the freight costs right now.
From the bulk point of view, you're correct, but if
Not
you look
from
at
container,
the containers, it's a disaster. What happened is because China is now a major exporter and is putting another 100 million tons in the market, they basically occupied every container out there. So there's not enough boxes for us to put our steel in. So the container prices, especially coming from Southeast Asia, it went up from $150 to $300, $400. So, and did it come down? A little bit, but not. It's still the cost of freight on containers is extremely high, which I think hopefully will ease, but I don't know when. Bulk prices, you're absolutely right. On the bulk prices, it kind of like stabilized somewhere, but it's still, bulk prices are still, in my mind, very high.
Actually, right now in China, in the loading port, we've been seeing minimum 15 days up to 25 days congestions.
Yeah.
So the main reason that China recently started to face with the congestion is because the export figure is increasing in China. So when we talk about the Chinese export, we were talking about 8.5 million ton monthly. In July and August, China has exported 9.5 million ton. So the port's congestion is high. So our expectation for the freight, especially for the bulk, we don't expect that the bulk freight is going to come down. Plus, it will be firm.
I'd like to hear from the audience. Do you think that let's start with the container prices. Do you think the container prices will ease up? Maybe you can raise hands if you think it's going to ease up. Only one says. And the container prices will be the same? And
There's one.
going, yeah, I know.
Tolga.
And going down? How many people think that the container price will go down?
One.
Yeah.
So
I
one
guess
third,
gonna-
one third, 30-30.
Yeah. How about bulk prices? Do you expect the bulk prices to go up from this point on the next 3 months?
I think we have divided into parts.
Yes.
For the Chinese side, maybe the freights can increase furthermore because of the congestions, as Mr. Hussein mentioned. But in Mediterranean Sea side, for the coasters, I believe that it is going to stay stable because of the limited activity regionally. So maybe we have to make it portions to see different activities.
You're right. I see you're saying it's regional. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense. We're looking at, I mean, from our side is basically across the Atlantic or across the Pacific, what the bulk rates would be, and if it changes and all that. Any other comments? Okay. And this is the forecast on the outlook for the construction markets, demand and supply balances in each major region of the world for the next 3 to 6 months. By the way, we publish basically every month about the outlook, and I don't know if you guys are receiving. Do you all receive our outlook forecasts? We do it almost monthly, except for August. I would like to see the audience. How many of you really read it? And are you? Let me ask, who's aware of it? You guys don't know?
3.
The outlook that we...
The outlook, yeah.
Yeah.
The SteelOrbis outlook.
Yeah, well, which is
IREPAS
really,
outlook.
yeah, IREPAS outlook.
IREPAS outlook,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm hoping that you benefit from it, because really there is some serious work that gets into that, and it's a good guidance, because what we're trying to do is, give you a picture for the next 3 months, and then and really everyone who participates in it does give their information really honestly. So I can tell you that information that they're putting there is not to sell you more or to trick the market, but it's real. So I strongly recommend that you guys read it and benefit from it. But anyway, on the markets in Latin America, I guess I took some notes, and maybe I can talk about that. You can start if you want.
Should I start with Europe?
Yeah.
You look for yours?
Yeah.
Okay, so while Don is looking for his notes, I will start with Europe. And yeah, the market situation in Europe on construction side is really bad. And despite a few countries like Poland, Netherlands, and Ireland, where they have higher prices for the cut and banded material, the others are really suffering. Well, the driving force was Germany in the past for the construction industry in Europe, but we had massive downwards trends in the last 18 months. We have about 35% less building applications than the years before. The problems are manifold. Ones are political, because our government, which is a green, social, and free Democrat coalition, is having every day new ideas how to make it unpredictable of what to do. So whether you have to install only heating pumps and that your gas heater has to be disposed right away, isolation, and so on and so on, so forth.
So you think it's political, basically?
It's partly political, because it's not only that, it's also that an investor is building a house to make profit.
Yeah.
Yeah? But if you say, okay, you have to do this and this and this and this and this to build up the house, and this is a new rule, and we have approximately fourfold those many restrictions, regulation on buildings and housings and construction in general, fourfold compared 30 years back. So this is enormous, and everything is being ruled and regulated. Also, Brussels is bringing a lot of new things. For example, if you dig a hole today, before it was no problem. You were digging a hole, you put a house in there, and that was done. Now, with all these reduction of values for which makes it environmentally dangerous, let's say that you find plumber in there or other things in that soil. Yeah, now it's special waste. You cannot dispose it anywhere. It's special waste, and that costs money. And it goes on, goes on, goes on, goes on. And then in the end of the day, the government is saying, yeah, but we have a rent cap. You can request maximum this amount of money because it has to be social.
That may be the
so
major thing.
Of course,
that
it is one of the major things. But if you want to strip your house down to a level, then it's not according to the rules anymore. So, and the big industrialized landlords, yeah, big companies,
Yeah.
where you have hedge funds, where you have pension funds behind, they all haven't bought one single apartment in Germany this year, and they won't do it in next year. Not a single apartment. And we need 400,000 apartments every year to cope with the rising number of demand, not only for refugees and for people coming over, but also because of the new standard of living, that you are having more single households, that you have, that the people want to have more square meter than in previous times.
I'll say, come to Texas. We can dig holes anywhere you want and build anywhere, anything you want. No, from what I see, what William is saying is that this thing is not going to go away anytime soon, because all these regulations, you cannot take it out.
No, you cannot take the regulations out.
I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And also the bureaucracy. If you give a building application to someone, to the municipality, it takes months and months and months before you get an approval. Yeah? If you want to build a new bridge today, like in my city, 8 years ago, they made the plan to build a new bridge. After 8 years, they are finally in a stage that everyone was giving his command, everyone was making concessions and so on. And after 8 years, now you want to build the bridge. But in the meantime, the bridge became so more expensive because of inflation and the higher costs. And I said, we better think twice whether we build the bridge now. It's too expensive. So it's catch-22, really.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds very pessimistic, but it looks like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Well, I can tell you, Latin America, the construction, is expected to increase 2%, per year, year on year in the next 5 years. So it is not bad. Central America will stay steady, you know, and there's no expectation is not any further growth. With the Middle East, especially the GCG countries, the increase is expected to be 5% year on year in the next 5 years. So it's good news that the Middle East is still there's growth there. Africa is also, from what I understand, there is 5%, year on year increase in Africa. And now Southeast Asia is even more. From what we heard this morning, they're expecting even more, like 6% or so. Isn't that true for the Southeast Asia?
I agree. What we see in Southeast Asia, especially the new investments are coming up. So it looks like the Southeast Asia producer, they're going to be the next net exporter to our region, like Middle East, Turkey, even for the flat product, for the long product. So we've been also hearing that also the producer in Southeast Asia, in China, also making some investments, feasibility also in Middle East, and also the close to Turkey, even in Turkey as well.
Lastly, can I ask the audience, do you have any real concerns on overall the market for any subject? I'd like to hear your comments on the concerns that you have, the questions that you have, that you want us, basically, the rest of the audience to answer, because I'm assuming you come here with certain questions in your mind. I'd like to hear what you think and what is your concerns. You can't tell me that you don't have any concerns, because I know the economy is not doing well for our steel industry, so you must have some concerns, some questions in your mind. Okay, I guess, go ahead if you want.
Hello. I think everybody's looking at China, what they're going to do, what the price will do, because as long as the price keeps like very competitive from China, I don't think that Turkey will be able to sell in any of the other markets like Africa or Latin America. Oh, they still sell, but it's very limited. So I think everybody's thinking, can the price in China drop further even? I don't know. That's like my only question, actually.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we can't change China. It looks like they're going to export even more. How about financing? Do you guys see more restriction on the financing of your trade? Is it easier for you to get financing from your banks for the trading of steel? I guess. Well, go ahead and voice yours. I'd like to hear it.
I don't think that it's easier to get financing. I think it's even more difficult. Interest rates are high. I don't think all the banks are supporting every trade, so we have to justify more and more. So,
yeah. I totally agree. That's why I'm asking. I wanted to see what you guys thinking, because actually, for you to, in the past, you could bring 10,000 tons and put it in a port and try to sell. Well, when the interest rates are, close to 0, 1%, you can do all that. But today, with the 8, 9% interest, it's been much harder. And from what I heard this summer in Turkey is it's a lot harder for the institutions to get credit from the banks. So the Turkish banks are not really financing any more investments. In fact, they're restricting the trade. So I don't know how it is in Europe, the bank situation.
For the time being, it's really not a big issue. Of course, you are much more sexier if you are doing anything which, in combination with green, with environmental, and with artificial intelligence. And that would bring me to one question to the audience. Did anyone hear about this vanilla steel, which was just funded by the European community with a 7-digit number or 6-digit number for implementing an AI assisted future business?
Future what?
Future steel business. Did anyone hear about that? Does anyone has any background information on that? Vanilla steel.
For now, they're just a trading platform online where you can buy secondary and stock material out of Europe, but the AI setup from them is not established yet. It's a rumor, but far from being active, far from being efficient.
Yeah.
What do you do with artificial intelligence in that? What's the...
Is there any intelligence in the steel business?
I wouldn't worry about it too much for now. Steel is too much of a physical commodity for now to be considered, to AI to be considered as a real threat to the business.
Yeah. I mean, I found it a bit strange that, as we heard today, that Europe is really so far behind the technology on IT, on everything, and computers and stuff like that. And then a platform and people on steel who were not really known to me and obviously not to many others, that they are giving so much money to an idea of trading steel online. I mean, we had this idea in iSteel Asia, if you remember. We had this in eSteel commodities and whatever. So that was all in the 90s when the internet hype came up, and we all know where they were ending. And
it's like you said, it's a hype. I think it will disappear pretty soon.
Sadly, none of them really survived in America. I mean, so far, the only platform that I know that's successful is LME, and that's not steel.
Shanghai Futures.
China Future, we don't know. Tell us about it.
Sure. I mean, think about the market that we're talking about, the physical market of the production, 1 billion and over 1 billion ton, 1 billion 60 million ton. Sometimes even we don't say 60 million, we make it round, we say 1 billion ton. But when we say 60 million, even if you ignore 60 million, is the 150% more production than what Turkey is producing as the biggest 11th producer. So China, we have the physical market, which is consuming of 90% in the local market. But for China, economy is not enough. So what China has done they created for they created another market for some certain product in the future market. So roughly, daily basis, iron ore, for example, 50 million ton transactions. So there is no any other futures in the world that is having that much volume more than China. And sometimes we ask the question, for example, whatever the number that you want to sell or whatever the number that you want to buy on the paper, you put it, then it goes. Because there is a big volume in it. And this is the biggest instrument that I strongly believe that this is the big disadvantage the others exporter company doesn't have, or exporter countries doesn't have. So this is one of the biggest instruments that it helps China to make the businesses.
Hussein, I was told by someone that this future business and future trading in China, that it's not only, let's say, an economical issue, but it's also a lot like betting. That even the housewives are putting money there, and they make some money here and there. And with the amount of people in China, it's very much possible that you end up with those numbers. But they are literally never ever physically traded, and it's like I bet in the lottery, and maybe I win or I lose. So it's. I mean, would you agree to that? Is it also
100% correct? And for example, when we are in the market, whether we are producer, trader, stockist, or scrap, we all know our competitors. So we have to follow our competitors to understand the market. When they are in the market, or are they in the market, with which price level they are in the market, So we know our competitors in the physical market. But in the futures market, we don't know our competitors.
Oh.
It can be
A house
producer, financial, the banks, big investment companies, even some individual investment, having the patient of the retirement patient putting that money. So we don't know. So that's the reason that the direction is not easy to estimate. And sometimes it's also not parallel with the physical market. So we can see some movement in the future, definitely opposite of the physical market.
No.
Yeah, I remember in early 2000s, Enron was the company that wanted to start the futures business and invited us to go and listen to their presentation. And we looked at it and said, wow, it sounds very good, but really, we don't think it's going to really pick up. And it didn't. I mean, and it took many years and still didn't. And there's still some, here and there, even we have tried some, but in the long run, especially for futures, I don't see how it is. Really, the only successful platform I know is the LME, and that's not steel.
I mean, we prefer Shanghai Future Exchange because of the reason of the big volume. For example, let me give you one example. None of the producers, whatever the firm bet or whatever the market price that you give, they cannot confirm the deal for the 2025 October shipment. 2025 October shipment. None of the producers is going to confirm the deal. But we've been confirming those deals, especially 1 year shipment delivery, we confirm it. And as per for Hong Kong, Singapore, for the future delivery. So this is what exile I meant. That instrument is helping to our Chinese friends, to us, helping us to make the business.
Yeah.
So 1 year delivery, 2 year delivery can be done.
You guys are exciting each other and produce so much tons, and now we can't sell them. Okay. If you don't have any other comments, I'd like to close this session. Thank you very much for attending, and hope to see you in, by the way, next one I think will be in Athens. So hope to see you guys in Athens in...
End of April.
Yeah, in end of April.
Thank you.